Wow, it's so great to be back, CPAC. Thank you so much for having me again this year. Last year, I got to introduce Andrew Breitbart a few weeks before he passed, and it's so weird being back this year, and I wish beyond anything that I could come out to this stage and say, introducing right now, Andrew Breitbart. But we all made a promise that even though Andrew was gone, we were going to stand around and we were going to fight. And with the crowds that came out this year, we're proving we're going to fight. So let's keep it moving and get on with our next panel. We're going to have a CPAC 2013 All-Star panel. And we have Robert Costa, is a National Review Washington editor and CNBC contributor. He manages National Review's Capitol Hill Bureau and reports daily on the White House, Congress, and campaigns. Ralph Hallow is the chief political writer of the Washington Times. He has served on the Chicago Tribune, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Washington Times editorial boards, and is the Ford Foundation Fellow in Urban Journalism at Northwestern University, resident at Columbia University Editorial Page Editor Seminar. And excuse me if I'm a little biased on this one, Larry O'Connor serves as the co-host of Mornings on the Mall on WMAL here in Washington, and is a regular guest host for the Dennis Miller Show, Hugh Hewitt, and Geraldo Rivera, and the editor of Breitbart TV. Larry oversees all the video content on the big sites. And one of my favorite radio talk show hosts, Rusty Humphries. Rusty is known for his bravery and personally interviewing. You can clap for Rusty, go ahead. His ego can take it, I'm sure. And personally interviewing terrorists on numerous occasions. He is also known for his intellect in bringing new concepts and ideas into the conservative movement. Now, when you have a bunch of rowdy conservative men, you need a strong woman to corral them all. So we have Genevieve Wood, the Vice President for Marketing at the Heritage Foundation. She is responsible for developing and executing marketing strategies to promote heritage. Previously, Genevieve worked more than 14 years in Washington politics, policy, and media. In 2000, Campaigns and Elections magazine named her a rising star in politics. I hope you all guys enjoy the panel.
Thank you, Sonny. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see a crowd here at CPAC. Are you guys having a good time? Yeah? Well, I think you're going to be in good treat for this afternoon because we do have an all-star panel set up here, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's in the news. These are folks who all have opinions, as I'm sure many of you do. So we're going to get their feedback on what's happening with the budget battle, the new pope who's just been announced. We may talk a little bit about Senator Rand Paul and his events of about a week ago.
What did he do?
What he, you know, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. And then we'll talk about Mayor Bloomberg and the soda ban and a number of other things. So to get us started, there's no better man than President Obama to launch our panel. I want to show a couple of clips. He's going to be on the big screen.
Oh, this is like Michelle coming down on the big screen.
I want to show a clip. This is President Obama from earlier in the week talking about the budget and the fact that we basically need to raise more revenue. And then we're going to hear from Senator John Thune, who has slightly a different take. Let's roll clip number one.
I voted for the first 3 nominees by the president. This is not about partisanship. I have allowed the president to pick his political appointees, but I will not sit quietly and let him shred the Constitution. I cannot sit at my desk quietly and let the president say that he will kill Americans on American soil who are not actively attacking a country.
The country needs more senators who care about liberty. But if Mr. Paul wants to be taken seriously, he needs to do more than pull political stunts that fire up impressionable libertarian kids in their college dorms. He needs to know what he's talking about.
Okay, that was not President Obama or Senator Thune, well, let's start off with Rand Paul. Robert, I know we talked earlier this week about this particular story. Senator McCain clearly didn't quite have the respect for Senator Paul's filibuster that many others did. What's your take on what happened last week?
I think Senator Paul is one of the most fascinating figures in the Republican Party right now. When you look at his father, Ron, retiring from Congress, a lot of people thought that the libertarian wing of the Republican Party would be suffering. And you see Rand Paul, even here in the halls of CPAC, but especially on Capitol Hill, really defining the future of the Republican Party. And I think he's been very savvy in how he's gone about this. Instead of just making a broad argument for the post-Romney, post-Bush era, he's been a legislative maven. He took that drone strikes, used the John Brennan nomination for the CIA, and made a case for it. And that shows how he's different from his father, because his father was seen by a lot of the mainstream press, a lot of critics, as a libertarian crank of sorts, where Rand Paul has more broad appeal, and he's also really working within Congress to forward his agenda. And just from being a reporter here at CPAC, I think he has a very strong chance of winning the straw poll. There's a lot of momentum and enthusiasm for him, and John McCain has just apologized for that comment. And I think even McCain realizes, as a grandee in the party, that the party is moving in a different direction, that the appeal of a non-intervention in foreign policy is really picking up speed within the party. And Rand Paul stopped by National Review earlier this week. And one thing that he has as well is he's a charismatic figure, and that matters in politics. And we saw in his speech here and elsewhere on the Senate floor, this is a guy who resonates with a lot of people, and I think he has a bright future in Republican politics.
So did John McCain revise and extend his remarks? I did not know that he revised and extended.
He apologized.
Good for him.
Indeed.
You know why he was really angry at Rand Paul? Because he was just jealous that someone could stand up for 12 hours without urinating, let alone 12 minutes.
Well, Rand Paul had a little help. He had Senator Cruz and some other folks who came in. Let me come to you on this one, Ralph. I mean, there are a lot of folks that I don't know if I 100% agree with him on the constitutional pieces of it, but I do agree with the fact we ought to be putting some pressure on the Justice Department and the administration to come forward with a lot of clearer answers than they have. What was your take on it?
He's done everything extraordinarily right, given the peculiar situation he's in. His father, many conservatives agree with everything his father said, except his father could walk into a room and alienate 500 people within the first 2 minutes. Not because he's not a nice person, but because he's a finger wagger. He's a scold. A brilliant scold, but that's what he was. Rand is just the opposite. Rand looks for ways to do fusion. And some of you in conservative politics will understand how important that is in the history of American conservatism. I had the privilege of going with Rand Paul and his wife and two of his sons to Israel, Palestine, and Jordan last month, or January. And what I saw was an amazing politician, a man who maintained his principles, didn't deviate an inch, traveled with 40 evangelical Christian leaders, half dozen American Zionists, Jewish Americans, and spent 8 days winning friends, even though he was telling Israeli conservatives that, well, it might not be a bad idea, it might not be a good idea to build new settlements, say, in Ramallah, but I don't think the United States should tell you what to do. So we should stop giving you aid, and then you won't feel that you have to come to us to ask whether it's okay to do something. Now, I mean, that is brilliance, it seems to me. And oddly enough, he's a man of faith, and he doesn't boast about it. He doesn't wear it on his sleeve, but he takes it seriously. Yeah. And he's got everything a successful conservative politician should have to win the White House. Therefore, given the history of this country, we know it's not possible.
Larry, Rusty, the personality maybe aside, is what about this whole debate over the drone issue? I mean, do you think that resonated with the public? Did it change the dynamics of the political issue there beyond just the personality and maybe the rising star of Rand Paul?
I don't think so, actually. I think it ended up being about Rand Paul. But the good thing is that he he wrapped the entire discussion around the Constitution, or vice versa. He wrapped the Constitution around the discussion. And as lousy as the public education system is in America, the founders were so brilliant in laying out the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and it's such a simple document that I think that there are some fundamentals that even people in coming out of public school understand about the founding of our nation and understand about the Constitution. And when he laid out the question, the very simple question of whether the chief executive in the executive branch, the president, can order a kill strike against an American citizen on American soil, I think that spoke to people on a very fundamental level that they understood, well, of course not. The answer to that question has to be no. And the fact that Rand Paul never got that answer, number one, talks about the questionable aspects of how the Obama administration has carried off this very robust war with drones. Do people understand that 4,800 people have been killed by drone strikes under the Obama administration? It's an astounding number. And to not be able to answer the question as to whether it is constitutional for the president to order a strike against a U.S. citizen on American soil, I think is troublesome. And the fact that Rand Paul then had to go to such lengths to even get that simple answer, that's what resonated. I don't think it advanced the actual drone question that much, but that's the beauty of American politics in 2013. It's about the imagery, it's about and sometimes it is that you try to remove the personality from the question based on your question, Genevieve. You can't.
But don't you think Rand Paul's pretty low-key? I mean, he gave almost a lecture here, wonky, very policy-oriented. He's charismatic, but he doesn't have a raucous, rah-rah.
I'm just glad to see a politician that actually stood for something, have some core values, core beliefs in something.
Well, and that thing is the Constitution.
Well, it's something. Maybe it's something you disagree with me on. Fine, but stand up for something. And on the other hand, you have my friend John McCain over there stuffing his face with President Obama. If he really had some core values and core convictions, he didn't like what Rand Paul stood for, fine, go to the filibuster and call him on it. But instead, what did he do? He waited the next day, had a nice party with Obama, enjoyed himself, fed that fat face of his, and then came back and went on the Senate floor and made an issue about it. How about standing a little bit for a core value and principle? Now, I understand John McCain is a big supporter of the war on terror. I am as well. I understand also a guy who's been through war. I haven't been to war. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Afghanistan. I've been to Guantanamo. My father was killed in Vietnam, okay? I get the concept of standing up for the military and protecting our country. But John McCain, if you want to protect the country, how about this? How about sticking with your pledge to build the damn fence? Then we'll talk. By the way, you guys, is the mic on? Are you guys here? Please, don't be afraid to get a little rowdy. Let's go. Let's make some noise. There we go. Hurrah. Sorry, Genevieve. Go hoorah. Go ahead.
That's exactly what we need. That's exactly what we need.
By the way, I'm done. Thank you, everybody.
We had to drop the mic moment right here.
Rusty. Well, I do want to move to that little dinner that I think you referred to and this whole debate over spending and the budget and the like. So let's see if we can roll in the clip that is Senator Obama and then followed by, President Obama. I wish he was Senator.
Oh, if only.
And then we can put him back down.
Are you referring to Michelle 4 years from now?
No, let's not. Be careful what you say.
Sweet Lord.
All right, let's roll that clip of President Obama.
Did you get that?
I think what's important to recognize is that we've already cut $2.7 trillion out of the deficit. If the sequester stays in, you've got over $3.5 trillion of deficit reduction already. And so we don't have an immediate crisis in terms of debt. In fact, for the next 10 years, it's going to be in a sustainable place.
It's amazing what a deaf ear the president has to what's going on around us. You have $16.7 trillion in debt. We'll add $10 trillion to it over the next decade. And while the president's been in office, we've added $6 trillion to the debt. And he also made the comment in the last couple of days that he didn't want to balance the budget just for sake of balancing the budget. Well, why else wouldn't you balance the budget? You balance the budget because we've got to get control of the runaway spending and the runaway debt. And he just keeps piling on more and more spending, and now they want yet even much higher taxes.
Where do you even start? I mean, with this thing, we don't have a problem right now. We're really not in a crisis right now.
Either the president is the biggest liar in the history of the United States of America or the dumbest human being ever. I have a 12-year-old daughter that understands you can't keep spending money, or else you don't have enough money to buy your New Direction tickets.
Well,
so I'm telling you, One Direction tickets, so which concert she wants to go to. Sorry.
New Direction was your garage band, wasn't
exactly,
it?
Thank you,
I
yes.
thought so.
No, but he can't be this dumb.
No.
Really? I mean, he cannot be this.
He isn't. He's
this-
incredible.
not
Let's be
dumb.
generous.
He's not dumb.
He's duplicitous. Let's be generous. The president called the George W. Bush deficits unpatriotic when he was running for president. And I believe that was 12 trillion ago. Maybe I'm rounding up a little bit. And also, the federal government, by the way, has raised more money via taxes, via income taxes, than in its history, and that's under the evil George Bush tax cuts, which proves, by the way, that lowering taxes actually brings more money into the federal government. Thank you. The president now says that we don't have a long-term debt crisis, but anytime there's any discussion going on with Republican leadership, he's pushing to raise taxes. Now, if we don't have a debt problem, why does he want to continue raising taxes? He's completely talking around himself. Unfortunately, you didn't keep it going because George Stephanopoulos' follow-up question, it was so tough. He actually didn't do anything. Say a damn thing to him.
I was given the microphone because my voice didn't carry, or because of the symbolism, or I paid for this microphone. Actually, I didn't. No, I did.
Bragger.
I was going to say about President Obama. So I'm going to put. I'm taking a wild leap here, but I'm going to put this panel down as skeptical about the current president. Is that fair?
That might be right.
Yeah, actually, you haven't said anything outrageous.
He's National Review. He has to stay above the fray.
Yeah, I mean, could you?
It's coming. Give him time.
Do me a favor. Don't start now.
Well, I think it's interesting when you watch the politics of what President Obama is doing in that interview. I think everyone in this room, when you talk to conservative activists, they agree that on fiscal issues, everyone here thinks there's a problem and that there needs to be a balanced budget in 4 years or in 10 years. But the broader question for the Republican Party is this. I spend my days on Capitol Hill, and when you talk to Republicans privately, senators and congressmen, they're very worried that after the 2012 election, the resonance of austerity, the resonance of the Ryan budget, it did not play. And they wonder when they go ahead to 2014, everyone here may recognize there's a problem, but they think Obama believes that if he just continues to talk about stimulus, spending, taxes on the rich, taxes on corporations, that he can craft an electoral majority. And you see, for instance, in Bobby Jindal's speech yesterday, that he's talking about Republican messaging. Is it too much about budget? Should it be more about tax cuts? Should it be more about growth? How do you articulate a message that actually wins? And the Ryan budget, very popular with conservatives, but I just wonder in the future if that Romney pick of Ryan, if the Republican Party is going to continue to move in that direction of being all about the budgets. Obviously, most people I think here would agree that if you want to balance the budget, you have to start doing things now. There will be a debt crisis if you look at any chart. But the politics of it are complicated. Are people paying attention? Do people beyond CPAC care? And I think that's what Obama's betting on with that kind of interview.
And
Yeah,
Genevieve,
I'm sorry, just real fast, I think when you say, was it a good idea to bring Ryan in, you use the word austerity, and I see Republican congressmen using the word austerity. The president uses the word austerity. The American people, they know that word austerity linked to riots in the streets in Paris and in Athens because people were throwing Molotov cocktails because austerity measures are taking all those really yummy things away from them. Right. Austerity is the worst word to use. Everybody knows that if you get out of debt in your personal life, that means you're in good shape, and that means you can do stuff with that money. And that's what we need to talk about, and hopefully tonight, Ted Cruz, right there, will send that message. He will not use the word austerity. It's how you send the message, not what the message is.
Part of the big problem we have is President Obama does one thing that's brilliant, and that is he uses emotion. And that is the thing that resonates to the low information voter or the people, and it's not even their fault. They've got kids, they've got jobs, they have things going on in their lives. Hey, that Kardashian show is awesome. You know, there's a lot of things going on that people don't want to pay attention to.
The Kardashians are capitalists, by the way.
Well, they are,
by the way.
and Bruce Jenner is a great guy. But I only bring that up is because then when conservatives get up, we start talking about, well, 1.5 trillion, we start throwing out all these numbers and people go, let me turn the channel as fast as I can. And we need to start working on messages that resonates on an emotional level to regular people and do it in a way that they go, oh, now I get, okay, well, that makes sense. You can't keep spending that kind of money. Yeah. And Obama's out there going, oh, no, I'm cutting the deficit. And we need to start getting angry because the American people are angry and say, no, he's lying to you. Yeah. And we have to make it very, very clear.
My buddy Joel Pollak.
Thank you, yes. Let them know that's right. Yes.
If anger was all it took, the White House would belong to conservatives and the Republican Party. Anger is not what it takes. What it takes is an understanding of who Obama is and what he's up to. And what he's up to, he's doing very well at. He wants to take this country to a state of socialism that it has not yet achieved, although it came very close with Richard Nixon and his wage and price controls. So, Obama's doing what he thinks is good for America. He wants to make us a more egalitarian, equal society. Some of us here, I guess all of us here, know every time that's been tried, the opposite has happened. People have become poorer, all across the board, except for the few elite at the top who run the political system. So, Obama's doing a good job of trying to achieve socialism in America. The task of conservatives is to do a better job of explaining why socialism doesn't work and why free markets do work, and without using the word compassion, explain why the most compassionate system ever invented in the history of the world is capitalism. Free
but
market
it has to be done on a level where it affects the individual.
Real people.
Real
Exactly.
people. Because
Well,
you're
how
using a
about
lot of
making-
words there that are
Rusty-
very brilliant, but most people go, I don't get it, I don't
But
care.
how about making, I mean, the moral case for this? It is absolutely immoral. We are putting on this kind of debt on the next generation. I mean,
course.
talking about
Of course.
balancing the budget.
I get it, you
in
get it.
10 years, an 8-year-old's 18. Why is it a bad goal? And somebody said this, I think Senator DeMint, maybe earlier this week, said this very thing. Shouldn't we have a goal of saying by the time today's third grader graduates from high school, we have balanced the budget in this country? We should make that promise to them. It is completely doable. Even Paul Ryan, whose budget last time out did not balance the budget in 10 years, has come forward with one that does.
But again, each Congress doesn't have to do what the last Congress told them to do.
And you know, but how to make it personal. Joe Pollack at Breitbart News made this case, and we wrote compendium articles about this. During the sequestration battle, Obama gave his speech about the horrific sequestration, how bad it was going to be, and he was surrounded by, as Joel put it, the village people.
That's right.
He had the guy with the hard hat behind him, and he may have had an Indian, I'm not sure.
I believe he did.
Excuse me, Native American. And they were all behind him because he was showing the real world consequences of these horrible cuts. And the Republican Party had no message. When John Boehner came out to give his speech, he had a big doomsday clock behind him, counting down the days until the sequester, because all he wanted to do was point the finger of blame to Obama. And you know, there were a few lone voices in the Congress saying, blame, we should be standing up taking credit for this.
Right.
For the first time, we're actually going to sort of cut spending at the federal level, and we should talk about how that's going to help people in the long run.
That's right.
One quick thing. I've been asking people at CPAC what they think about the second Obama term. And I think the real challenge for conservatives is you're dealing with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic White House. And it's very easy to propose a 10-year balanced budget, a 4-year balanced budget like the conservatives are doing in the House. But that's never going to become political reality, at least in the short term. So on one side, you're articulating your principles, and that's, I think, a big part of politics. But are conservatives going to be open in any sense to a deal, a grand bargain? Most seem to say no when I ask around. They don't want any kind of revenue, any kind of taxes. Some are okay with tax reform. But if you're going to go through the next 2 or 4 years as a conservative, as a Republican lawmaker, you're dealing with a Democratic president who's quite liberal. And so are you just going to continue to rail against the administration, or are you going to try to craft a bargain on piecemeal parts of entitlement reform? I think that's an open question for the movement and for the party.
Well, let me get everybody's opinion here, and Rusty, I'll start down here with you. If you were advising the conservatives within the Republican Party, what would you tell them to do, per what Robert is saying here, in terms of getting us on the right course, A, to solve this problem, but 2, recognizing you've got elections coming up now in a year and a half, you've got to deal with that political reality as well. What would you be advising those that are going to be coming out with Republican and conservative budgets to do?
Well, of course, we have to cut the size and scope of government. That's very simple. But then we have to have a message.
It's not simple, you know it.
Yeah, but what do you tell them to do?
I'm sorry.
Is it
Of course it's simple. There's so much waste and fraud and government overdone. I mean, of course it's simple.
It's simple to understand, it's not simple to do, but that's because there's an industry.
It's a hell of a lot simpler to do than anybody's trying.
No.
Nobody's trying.
It's hard to do
cutting.
because there is a very profitable industry in this town.
People are getting paid.
There are
Of course they are.
Republicans
But the
who
message-
make up
on both
the
sides of the
electorate
party.
who
On
don't
both
want to
sides.
lose
The problem
their
is we're not
bennies that
doing a
they're
very
getting
good
from the
job.
government. You have to face that fact. the people who are going to vote for our team actually have a vested interest in socialism.
They are not
that's
our
the problem.
team.
If you don't
They're
recognize
Republicans,
that
not
problem,
conservatives.
you're not going to get
That's right.
anywhere.
Well, again, I'm not willing to give up. And I'm not willing to
Who's
sell out.
suggesting give up?
And I'm not
Understand
willing to
the problem.
say, you know, gosh, there's nothing we can do, so we might as well just keep paying. I'm not doing it. What I'm saying is that we do need to show why it is in the best interest of the people in our country to cut the size and scope of government and have a message that makes it so, again, they can understand what it is. Not everybody went to Ivy League colleges. I know you're very, very smart, Ralph. I'm just trying to keep up. I take notes just to read your stuff, which is good. But not everybody wants to do that, so we have to make it. And again,
didn't tell
what's
me you
Obama
learned
doing
how
up
to
there?
write.
He's doing it. You know, he got people up there and they're crying, and little babies and women, and oh, they're all going to die because we cut 14 cents out of $1 billion. Oh, please, we're all going to die. So we have to have a better message, and we have to do it, unfortunately, on more of an emotional level to get people to want to understand what's going on.
But yeah, there is. It's true, Rusty. But there is a way to do it, and I actually see a little bit of hope. There's a couple of little glimmers that you see coming out of this. I think the sequestration thing has been fantastic. It really has, in terms of narrowing down this discussion and really focusing. The White House tours question was brilliant, and how that ended up. The Obama administration walked into it. Earlier this week, and we've all been here, so you might not have seen this, Representative Andy Harris, a doctor from Maryland, the lone Republican from Maryland. I just moved here a few months ago in Maryland. I'm from California. I feel right at home in Maryland. You guys got to watch out. He was on the Appropriations Committee. He had the director of the Center for Disease Control in front of him. And he had a piece of paper. He says, hey, you guys sent out this pamphlet that said we're cutting $30 million because of the sequestration. And because of that, 2,050 children, they had it down to the 50, 2,050 children in Maryland would go without immunizations. But I've got the Obama budget right here, the same one that you proposed, sir, and you were going to cut $58 million out of that budget, and no children were going to go without immunizations. Now, please explain this to me. And the answer from the guy was, I'll have to get back to you. But that proves right there that, number one, they're lying to you. Yes. Number two, they're using children to prey on you. And number three, you can cut without these effects being as disastrous. Call this president out on those things, and we must continue to point out how he is manipulating you through the media. That's right. This president did not run for re-election on gun control, but he has spent the last 3 months talking about how gun control and quote-unquote an assault weapons ban will save the children of Sandy Hook, while the children in his own home district of Chicago are getting slaughtered on a nightly basis. And he says nothing about that. And this is the one president, and this is the one Attorney General, Eric Holder, who can stand up in front of the African American community in urban centers like Chicago and actually make a difference with gangbangers. Actually stand up and say the culture of violence in our community must end and must end today, but he won't say that. He will only talk about assault weapons, quote unquote, and the children of Lily White, Connecticut, Sandy Hook.
Do I infer correctly that what you're asking for is more gun control from this?
No, I don't want the government controlling anything.
But Ralph, what about, there you go. Ralph, what about these guys here are making a very strong case. They're going on the offensive, and that's what I think you're suggesting.
Yes.
Conservatives and Republicans.
We're not calling it fall apart
You're
because
right.
it's built on lies.
Right. We're not having congressmen coming out there and just saying the word. President Obama is lying to you. Oh, no, we can't use those words. Yes, that's what he's doing. They're lying. I don't know how this guy can get up every morning, look at himself in the mirror, and say, yeah, I'm going to go lie to the American people like this again. How do you do it? I couldn't do it.
And why can't
that's because you're not a Republican. Yeah. Republicans have been doing that as long as the Democrats have been doing it. That's why
we're trying to change things. That's why we're here at CPAC.
Well, right.
That's what the conservative movement's about.
You have to demand more from Republicans than you pay.
Amen, brother. I'm with you now. All right, we got one. Okay. Hoorah!
Robert, let me ask you, why is it so hard for Republicans to stand up with true moral outrage and talk about the fact that if you want to be concerned about Social Security, you want to be concerned about Medicare and these problems, that it's actually the president's plan that is driving more people not only into debt, but eventually destroying any safety net that we have in this country for anybody, and that if you're really absolutely concerned about helping those who need help, we need to go after and reaffirm these programs and actually address it from that side of it. Why is there no moral outrage here on the conservative, or I shouldn't say the conservative side, the Republican side?
Well, I think Republicans and conservatives deserve some credit for really making the case for fiscal reform. I don't think it's a case of not being willing to go into battle against the left and against the Democrats in 2010 and 2012. I think Republicans worked their hardest to try to make that case. The broader national problem is who's listening? Who's agreeing with this? How are you going to get some more voters to agree with that message? Because conservatives believe that the problem is clear. But I think the problem is also within the Republican Party. So the sequestration is a great example. I remember before the election, National Review did many interviews with Republican leaders, Republican politicians, who were being very worried about the sequester and complaining about it and saying we got to replace it. Whereas later, after the election, many conservatives were saying, let it happen. Let the cuts go through. It's a sliver in the federal budget. Let the cuts happen. But so Republicans have a confused message on a lot of these spending issues. There are some clear messages on entitlement reform, but sequester is an area where the American people, if you're listening for the right position versus the left position, it's not entirely accurate or clear.
Well, the Republicans have not presented a budget of their own that would cut Social Security, Medicare, and the other entitlement programs. So, if you're a conservative, whom should you be focusing on? The Democrats, who you know are going to ask for what they want, and it's the opposite of what you want, or are you going to be asking the Republican Party, as the only vehicle available for conservatism in this country, to do what you ask it to do?
Well, let's see what the Republican Study Committee and others do when they come out with their budget, because I think that may be a slight difference than what you saw with the Ryan budget. I want to move on to another topic, which is what happened earlier this week across the pond, as we say, in Rome, and the announcement of a new pope.
Yeah.
Not a political story per se, but obviously has huge impact on the political debate and cultural debates. First of all, how many of you here are Catholic? Anybody here on the panel Catholic? All right. We'll let you guys comment first. But let's watch another Catholic, Chris Matthews, on his take on the selection of Pope Francis. Let's roll that clip.
But I think what we've seen here is the election, perhaps, we're all basing this on small evidence so far, of kind of a Paul Begala papacy, a Bob Casey from Pennsylvania papacy. In other words, someone who's culturally conservative on issues like abortion, and very much so, but also a liberal in terms of economics. I grew up in Pennsylvania. We're familiar with that point of view politically. These are conservative Catholics who are very prominent in Pennsylvania, who are very culturally conservative and very economically liberal.
I sensed a rather remarkable, resigned consensus that we needed a man, obviously, who's holy. We call him our Holy Father. A man of theological precision, like Benedict was and John Paul. We also needed a man, though, who had a good track record of sound, effective pastoral governance. And we got one.
All right, Larry, let me come to you. Is this going to be a Paul Begala paper?
Yeah.
That's a little scary description there.
First of all, thanks for playing the clip. We've now tripled the audience of that show.
Hardball,
thank you.
You know, I think that Chris Matthews is, by the way, I hope they never take, I hate the fact that MSNBC took Ed Schultz off the air. I hope Chris Matthews stays. Coming from the Breitbart news world, they are gold for us, and we want them there on that wall. I think that people are really misguided when they try to compare the papacy and the Roman Curia to American politics. I think that they show themselves to be the morons that they are, Chris Matthews, because they have to understand that, thank you, when Catholics chose Pope Francis, they were not choosing a replacement of Pope Benedict. They were choosing a replacement of St. Peter. That's how they do it. And every pope does that. And his job is not to do what needs to be done today with regard to the modern political scene. His primary focus is to continue the teachings of the church, the faith and morals that were handed down, as we believe, from Jesus to St. Peter. So that's his job, all right? That being said, he is a political figure. He does have things that he has to do over and above that. We saw it done very well by Pope John Paul II. I'm thrilled that I was able to come of age politically during a Reagan presidency, a Thatcher prime ministry, and a John Paul papacy. I think that it is way early to suggest that this guy is in one way or another aligned with the Democrat or Republican Party. I think that it is, however, I will say this, it is absolutely offensive to me that the Obama administration sent a contingent led by Joe Biden a man who has been so outspoken and a proponent of abortion in America, to have him represent our country. This was a great moment for this president if he truly wanted to reach across the aisle to ask Paul Ryan or ask Newt Gingrich to go and represent the Catholics of America in that contingent to the Vatican.
Robert.
I don't understand what Chris Matthews was talking about there, but I'd like to make a quick comment on the other video. Forget this Paul Begala papacy. I don't understand what he's trying to say. Odd. But Timothy Dolan, Cardinal from New York, for people who think that public life now doesn't have a religious element or an element of faith, I think just turn to the example of Cardinal Dolan. I think he's almost become the Billy Graham of the right in the sense that he's very interested in public service, engaging with politicians. He's friendly with Paul Ryan. He used to be the Archbishop in Milwaukee. Dolan spoke at both of the conventions this past year. And so Dolan, to me, is a very interesting figure. He was even touted as a potential papal contender during the recent weeks. And I think with Francis, comparing to American politics, Larry's exactly right. It just doesn't make sense to compare it to Pennsylvania's Bob Casey. But I think it's a wonderful moment for Catholics worldwide, for celebrating the new Pope. He chose the name of St. Francis of Assisi. And to make it about American politics, no thanks.
Let me tell you that Larry is right part. I want to remember that. He said I was right.
Oh, I thought he said you were right.
You don't hear that a lot, do you?
Not part. But let me tell you a story about this guy, Chris Matthews, and how much credibility you should attach to him. Years ago, when he was doing Hardball, he didn't know really who I was. He would have me on the show, and one time we're going, taking a little break, we go to the men's room, and he's standing
I like where
there,
this story's going.
He says, you know, you people at the Washington Times don't know how really conservative I am. Now, don't let it go beyond this room. But he was trying to sell himself to me as a conservative. And the guy you know for the last 10 years is what? Probably the most liberal.
Well, listen, he hangs out in the green room at MSNBC, populated by Rachel Maddow, Lawrence O'Donnell, Al Sharpton. He is the conservative in the room.
Absolutely.
In his
That's a very good point.
Yes.
Yeah. Frightening, but good.
I mean, that guy that looks like Chandler from Friends.
That's Joe Scarborough.
Is that Rick Maddow?
He's a Republican.
Rachel.
Oh, you're talking
Rachel.
about Chris Hayes.
Rachel Maddow. I always get that confused.
You're so mean.
But what? I'm sorry. But you know, here's the one thing that I think the Catholic Church proves one reason why government and what we've been doing has been so wrong.
Steady.
We keep why government? No, the Catholic Church is proving it, and that is, it says, I'm not a Bible scholar, I'm a Protestant, I'm not a Catholic, but I believe Jesus said something about you are your brother's keeper. It's not your government is your brother's keeper. Your government, I'm supposed to do it myself. I'm not supposed to pitch in a bunch and not worry about it.
This is a great point, but understand what Obama does, because it's so insidious. He used that language, that I am my brother's keeper, in the National Prayer Breakfast in 2012 to as an argument in favor of big government spending.
Exactly.
They take the Bible and take Jesus' message, appropriate it to a giant government
But again,
program.
and then that's the point. That's not what the Bible talks about. It is not having the government do it for you. It is about service yourself to another. And that is what conservatism is about. It is about me choosing who I want to help and what I want to contribute to help somebody else should I choose to do so. And the government, and what is the Catholic Church, I believe, 10 to 15 times more efficient with the money for charities than the government.
And meanwhile, this president's policies actually drive the Catholic Church out of the charity business.
Of course, because they want to get rid of the tax credits and everything
because
else.
they're forcing them to supply birth control.
The whole religious liberty, religious liberty question.
And because of same-sex marriage. Up in the Boston Archdiocese right now, the Catholic Church is out of the adoption business right now, because they are, by law, forced to give exact same preference to a same-sex couple as they would to a male-female couple. And instead of getting into that political morass and going against their faith and values, they've decided to just completely get out of the adoption business. And so explain to me how the world is better off with the Catholic Church not being involved in adoption.
And there's one other thing, and this is for you, but it's not like you can say, you know, today, I think abortion's going to be okay. It's not your book. You didn't write the Bible. We don't get to change what's in there. And if you believe in Catholicism or Catholic or the Bible, we don't get to say, I don't like that page.
That's right. I hope Soledad O'Brien is hearing that because she's a little off on this subject.
Yeah.
Well, I will note, it's been noted this particular Pope said he was opposed to giving into communion to politicians who supported abortion.
Exactly.
A statement he made years ago, not even just recently, but years ago.
Which makes the Obama administration's decision to send Joe Biden over there that
all
much
the more offensive.
Exactly.
That's
because
exactly
it automatically creates an awkward international moment. Will this Pope now, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens when Joe Biden goes up the aisle at St. Peter's to receive communion.
Yeah. Well, I will say, as a Protestant myself, to the Catholics in the room, I was very delighted to see the selection because, as goes the Catholic Church in many respects, so much influence that has on the culture, so delighted to see the pick that was made there. Let me ask you this, and by the way, not just the Cardinals picking him, we believe the pick came from on high. Let me roll in one other clip talking about, first we're going to have President Obama on the White House tours, but then I really want to get to the Bloomberg clip and get your all's reaction on that. Let's roll this one.
Well, what I'm asking them is, are there ways, for example, for us to accommodate school groups, who may have traveled here with some bake sales? Can we make sure that kids potentially can still come to tour?
I think that it is incumbent on government to tell people what they're doing to themselves and let people make their own decisions. So our job is to educate people, and the ban on bigger cup sizes was a ways to remind you if you wanted 32 ounces, you'd have to take 2 cups, so maybe you'd only take 1. But people have a right to make products, and people have a right to buy them, and I don't know which comes first.
I don't know which one comes first.
Yeah, I've heard guys say those things like that. Yeah, I'm going to educate you, so let me beat you first. You know, I mean, education is not by using force. And again, using the force of government, that's not the job of the mayor to tell. Listen, you know, again, this fat on me is not fat. This is what I like to call storable goods because of the Obama administration. Just in case something goes wrong, I'm prepared. But again,
we had a judge who got this right. We had a judge who got this right, overturned the soda ban, so good for that particular judge, right?
Yeah. But, you know, the soda ban question, I think, is a great issue, and this is what's so great about it. It's a fundamental thing that every, again, common sense American can look to, and it goes against everything that all of us understand America to be, that a government can tell a business that they can't sell a Big Gulp. It's just ridiculous. And thank God for Michael Bloomberg to throw it out there in front of us, because we can now then take the soda ban as an example of what happens when we allow the government to run out of control and be as arrogant and intrusive as the New York City government is.
Right.
Do you want America to be run like New York? And by the way, that being said, it was a local decision. If people want to live under that in New York, let them. And if people want to move out of New York and live in another state where they don't have the ban, let that happen. That's about local control. And that's a wonderful thing about our country.
Ralph, Robert, final comments from you all on that.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Well, let me ask you this. Will this be the end of these silly bans, or we're going to see a lot more of things like this?
As long as you have people who believe that they are entitled by their intelligence or their office to ram down the throats of other people, their morality, their standards of behavior, their food choices, this will go on. What will change it is when people who think the way people in this room do, when the large majority of Americans actually think these things through and rebel at the very idea that the Constitution, the Founding Fathers envisioned that a man like that running anything. He thinks that the government is, that we are governed by the government. Well, actually, we gave the government the power to make decisions that we tell it we want. He's got it backwards. The liberals tend to see it the wrong way.
Well, he basically admitted he didn't know.
I know we're over, but I got to say really quickly, this is so critically important, the soda ban thing, because this is really about Obamacare. The moment the American people concede that the government has a say in our health care, has a say in how we spend our money on our doctors and our health, and it becomes a burden on the government to have to pay for people that get diabetes or get lung cancer or get heart disease. As soon as it becomes a financial question, then logically the government can say, listen, we got to pay for all these fat people, so we're now going to restrict what you can do to keep yourself from getting fat. This is really about government control over our lives through healthcare, and that's why we must fund Obamacare.
Right, but this is also a way that we can get the regular people to pay attention because it's affecting their life. Okay, now it's government's affecting you other than just giving you free money.
Robert, last word and we're done.
We were backstage. There's a table full of water, and right next to the table of water is a big gulp. And it had half a thing from soda, and it was Sarah Palin's. I talked to one of the security guards back there. He says, I'm going to put that on eBay if I can. And I think that big gulp moment from Sarah Palin says a lot about why, as much as conservatives argue about things like sequester and those kind of issues bore many people across the country, she has it. She has it right, and she knows what appeals. Because when she brought out that big gulp, she said so much just with that gesture. Because as much as there's complicated issues in Washington, what she was really talking about with that big gulp sip and railing against Bloomberg was liberty and freedom. And so as bad as things get in the party, conservatives really believe that freedom and liberty are what's going to bring them back. And in a strange way, when Bloomberg and a lot of liberal politicians use soda bans and these kinds of things, it actually is good for the conservative movement because it reminds them what they're really fighting for, and it's to get the nanny state away, individual liberty, etc.
All right, gentlemen, please thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming and thanking our panel, Robert Costa, Ralph Hallow, Larry O'Connor, and Rusty Humphries. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Genevieve.
You guys can go. Thank you.